Ever hear the old hymn, "This Little Light of Mine"? This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. My flat singing aside, when you're shining brightly, what do people see? How do you express who you are? Do you love yourself? Self-love is being in your light, but it's also being accountable for how you express your identity. The sun and the moon are tied for the most personal planets in your horoscope, in your natal chart. They're not generational. They're here, now. They're you. Your vitality is represented by the sun. The moon controls your emotional cycles and your unseen reactions. But the sun is how you put yourself out there, how people see your mission and incarnation, very similar to the 10th house, your house of career. What house does your sun reside in? Unless your sun is in the very first house, you may embody a house that deals with varied forms of identity other than simple self-determination that would come with the first house. If you're a second house sun, you value security. Third house, basic communications. Fourth house, emotional foundations. Fifth house, creativity and romance, which is associated with Leo, which is part of the subject of this podcast. And so is the sun, which I'll get to. The 6th house is your work and health. 7th house is partnerships. 8th house, transformation and personal growth. 9th house, belief systems and higher education. 10th house is your midheaven, which we just talked about. 11th house is your purpose and what you gain from the work that you put in. Your humanity, rewards and benefits. The 12th house is your soul growth and boundaries and secrecy. So these are all simple representations of the houses, but where is your sun? How do you express your identity? What is dear to you? It's important to see what your focus is in life. To match everything up for you, the sun in astrology rules Leo. Leo rules the 5th house of creativity and romance. Leo is the sun's ideal placement, its natural home. The sun is said to be in its fall in the opposite sign, which is Aquarius. And the reason for this is Aquarius is a sign that's outwardly focused, thinking of humanity instead of one-to-one relationships and the self. The self is really tied to how one relates to others. And by others, I mean just crowds of people, humanity in general. To contrast, Leo is warm and loves to be seen as an individual. They thrive in one-to-one communications. They have no problem expressing themselves as a creative being. Notice this is not the house of marriage partners, but of lovers, having fun, drama, play. There's some exuberance to Leo, the sun, and the 5th house. How do you express yourself when your foundational understanding of identity is shaken? Accessing your creativity is a good start. It's said that people who have experienced traumatic circumstances have less access to their creative capacities. We talked about this a bit in the episode Neptune, if you've listened to that. How do you imagine yourself? Has someone shaken you to your core and told you to imagine yourself as something you're not? If you've gone through forms of child abuse, lifelong racism, sexism, and other ways people use to stop you from shining your light, you might forget who you are, but you can rediscover yourself. This is the new geometry with Lightseeker. In medical astrology, the sun is associated with the heart, spine, and general vitality. Sunflowers. When you look at them, they just look like the sun. Try incorporating this flower into your decor. As your computer or phone background, send somebody a sunflower emoji. Lemon balm is an uplifting tea you can make for yourself to think about your identity. It's an uplifting tea. Tarragon, another uplifting herb, is really good in stir fries or atop some asparagus. Eye bright. Have you heard of eye bright? Sometimes they put it in these new types of eyeshadow or eye creams or mascara. And it's said to strengthen the head, eyes, and memory. It's supposed to clear the sight. I don't know if it meshes well with all the other chemicals they put in those products, but anyway, its technical name is euphrasia, and Nicholas Culpeper was the one that assigned it to the zodiac sign of Leo, claiming that it strengthened the brain. And it was also used to treat bad memory and vertigo. If you want to look this up more, obviously, you could just check on Wikipedia. But my point is, do you see yourself clearly? You might not notice your posture when you're out in public, but it says a lot about you. When I used to teach public speaking to adults, we would do a unit on body language. And one of the books I would assign was What Every Body is Saying by Joe Navarro. Joe Navarro used to work for the FBI, and that was his job, to read people and see if they were really telling the truth. And there were some telltale signs, and an interesting part of that book was when he talked about how you have to find somebody's normal. So, for instance, if you're talking with someone and they have really shifty eyes, you might think, oh, well, that person's lying to me automatically. But actually, that can be some people's normal because of things they've experienced in their life where it's hard for them to make eye contact, or in their family of origin, they weren't taught to make eye contact with people. So I appreciated his book very much, especially for the purpose of public speaking. So to prepare for the class, I would read the book again, of course, and I had to evaluate my own bodily behaviors. And I was thinking most of the time, wow, people can tell this about me by the way I sit or stand or tussle my hair or let my eyes dart around the room. It's illuminating. In the book, The Silent Language of Leaders, Kinsey Goman explains that personal space is also important along with your physical gestures you're making, how close you're getting to people when you talk. Do you ever notice some instructors will pace around the room? And that's something that I would do, like go in between the rows. And this also raises problems for you based on your gender, unfortunately, in a very traditional higher ed environment. But you can use your body strategically to convey a type of leadership. And in Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score, he also talks about how many of his female patients who've experienced child abuse or domestic violence as adults cannot maintain eye contact for long amounts of time. And this makes sense because it conveys a lack of love of the self. It conveys a lack of trusting for other people. And it can be challenging to somebody to make eye contact when they genuinely don't trust others and they don't trust themselves to relate with others the way that would be healthy for them. And what I always used to teach students, whether I was teaching public speaking, as I mentioned before, or teaching writing, which was more common for me, is that most things are a skill. For instance, writing is a skill. Speaking in public is a skill. I've given public speeches before in front of crowds, and I've had to practice the speech over 30 times. And the reason why is because I knew I needed to have a bodily memory of how the speech felt in order to memorize it. Your body remembers going over and over the same mouth movements and the gestures that you're going to make to the audience. And it's always a good idea to practice as many times as you can in front of a mirror and actually saying it out loud, not just reading it over and over again. And I used to tell that to students because they would be nervous about giving presentations I would have students do presentations not just in the speaking classes, but in the writing classes as well. They would eventually have to present their research in front of their peers, and a lot of them were scared. So one of the things I told them was to get used to how your body reacts when you are in front of people. Practice what you're going to say. Don't just wing it, because some of you, I know, will get nervous and anxious. And I actually went through a period where I was so nervous and anxious when I would get up to speak in front of people, and I thought to myself, what is going on with me? Because when I was college age, I could do a presentation, I could get up and wing it, and I could make people laugh and make them feel comfortable. And for some reason, after I had been out of college, I had been teaching for several years, something was going on inside of me where I was getting nervous before I was going out to speak in front of people, and I could practice the speech over and over again. And that's actually what saved me, more or less, is that I had the speech practiced. So I would make myself get up there still, and after about minute 2, I would calm down. My body would say, okay, there's no threat here. You're going to be fine. And it was just a matter of put myself in a leadership role where I was speaking in front of people and saying, you can do this. And knowing that this is not going to be perfect because of this anxiety issue that you're having. But guess what? Life is not perfect. And you putting yourself out there is a huge step. I'm not just talking about me in this situation, but I'm talking about anybody who's scared to do something. You keep doing it over and over again, and eventually, and this happened for me, eventually your body's like, well, I guess we're going to do this anyway, so might as well do it, you know? And there's other research that you can look into on this, but eventually your body will go with you instead of working against you. And one of the ways to healing is feeling what it's like to be in your body and to know that it's yours. This is Evie Sands with Shine For Me.
You know it's what you do when you're thinking nobody's looking, no one's looking. Well, you gotta love a lot, whether you want to or you're just dreaming. You're just dreaming. First you hide, then you seek. Oh, and you're lonely, week to week. Oh, will you ever learn to shine for me? If you believe enough, drink the water, or so the story goes. So the story goes, you molest your mind to the promised land, over the border, over the border. Still you hide, then you see. Oh, and you're lonely, week to week. Will you ever learn to shine for me? Break down what you fear and all your alibis. Shake down close to the light. Looking for sanity beauty of your humanity. Where's the humanity? You take a dusty road and wonder why you can't see anything, can't see anything. So you hide, then you see. Oh, and you're lonely, weak to weak. Oh, will you ever learn to shine? Will you shine for me? Oh, you hide, then you see. And you're lonely, weak to weak. Oh, will you ever learn to shine? Come on and shine for me. Won't you shine for me? Shine for me. Will you ever learn to shine for me?
Associated tarot cards with the sun are, obviously, first, the sun is a tarot card, and the sun represents optimism, and the sun can represent a bright light after you've gone through a lot of darkness. And, you know, how are you experiencing your life in terms of happiness and joy? Because the sun has to do with that. If you have no sun in your life, if you have no happiness and joy in your life, think about your body when there's no sun. If there were no sun on Earth, you wouldn't get any vitamin D, and you wouldn't be able to process what is going on inside your body. Your body needs the sun. And, you know, there's all these science fiction depictions of us in space and stuff, and I always get frustrated because where is the depiction of UV light substitution? What are they doing with that? Because you can easily become pretty sick if you don't have some type of sunlight. And so my biggest question for you listeners is, are you radiating what you stand for? And is what you stand for something that is going to bring justice, happiness, peace to people? And this can be tricky because you can start out in a path that you see as bringing justice or bringing peace. But if you're on that path and you realize, okay, this is not actually what I thought it was, and it's actually bringing people, it's actually petty, or it's actually harming large groups of people. Now, I'm not talking about, you know, when there's an activist group and then the dominant group is like, oh, I'm very sad that you're doing this activism because it makes me question my power position. I'm not talking about that. That's actually useful. But what I am talking about is when you're trying to seek peace and justice and bring happiness to people, are you achieving your goal, or are you just using that as an excuse to check out of life and use your anger for negative purposes? And I've been guilty of this in the past without even realizing that I had a lot of anger and I wasn't allowing myself to experience any happiness in life because it just was easier for me to express that negativity instead of seeing, hey, this isn't problem solving. This is actually just bringing attention to the world that I don't want. And instead of using my creativity and imagination to build up the world that I do want, instead of showing love to other people, I'm just focusing on the ones that I don't love and that I really don't want to interact with. And that is, and I hate to be all, you know, new agey, hippy dippy, but that is actually attracting all the people that I don't like and that I don't think are working for peace, justice, happiness for other people who need that. And I think we also have to put our lives in perspective. You know, are you working to achieve your goals? Are you looking at your life like it's imperative that you try every day and that you let yourself shine? Are you recognizing that you need to maintain your life force? Or are you letting yourself go? Are you saying that your peace and your happiness is not as important as the people that you're working for? And what I mean is, are you letting yourself become martyred? You know, we talked about this with Neptune. Are you allowing yourself to be martyred out because you don't think that you're worthy of love? Because that's actually destructive, and you're not going to be able to help other people if you act that way. This is Beach Talks with Sungaze. Another tarot card that's associated with the Sun and Leo is Strength. What I want to focus on in regards to strength is the strength to be understanding, the strength to be compassionate in our one-to-one relationships. Are you patient with people? Are you the ferocious lion that Leo can often represent? Just steamrolling people and busy showing off your wealth of whatever, regular wealth, or how beautiful you are, or any of that. I mean, what are your goals with asserting your identity? I'll keep coming back to that. But how do you influence others? Really take a look at what you're putting out there about yourself. How do you coax others to your way of thinking? Is it by dragging people down? the word dragging. Let's look at that for a moment. That's a big buzzword right now, slang-wise. When someone's being dragged, we all notice, and we all, maybe not all of us, but some of us participate in the gossip of it. And there can be a remarkable shift that happens because of that. For instance, I had a friend recently, and she stood up for what she believed was right, which was, the rights of women generally. And she was dragged for it. And she had to have the strength to say, okay, you can make fun of me for this all you want, and you can humiliate me, but guess what? What I said, I believe in, I think is the truth. And that was so strong. That was a strong thing that she did. And when we're looking at Leo, we might think, oh yeah, it's embracing our animalistic self because it's the lion, and I don't believe in that. It's knowing how to release that animalistic self when you need to and say, yeah, I could jump in and I could drag these people right back, or I could let them make a fool of themselves and show everyone that what I believe is true. Or I could let this play out and they'll find out what's true in time. And sometimes that is so hard, but it takes real wisdom to know when that is the case, when you need to let it go. And, it's finding a balance between being your human self and your higher self. It's finding that balance, because you're not all higher self all the time, right? We need to eat. We exist on earth. We have needs that we need met that are very, we've had since we were young, since we were infants. But we have to have that higher level of consciousness. And when you express yourself, you might attract people who give you the evil eye. Now, the evil eye is something that's been passed around through many different cultures. But I'm thinking of, I won't focus on any particular culture, but I'll just say that when you are faced with the evil eye, it's people who wish they could shine, but they're not able to. Or, it's a combination of really loving what you're doing, but also hating that they're not where you are. And if you take that as only people who hate you because you're not doing something right, you'll never truly understand what your purpose is. Because there's always going to be some people who are giving you the evil eye. And what you can do is you can try to protect yourself by wearing an amulet. You can wear a hamsa, which is, that picture of a hand with 5 fingers and an eye in the middle. That's from Jewish culture. Actually Kabbalah, I believe. And there are other ways you can carry around stones. I mentioned black tourmaline in a previous episode. That's a good one to ward off negative energy. The stone is said to absorb all the negative energy for you, and then you cleanse it by placing it in, you guessed it, the sun. And so what we need is a combination of being secure with ourselves and also protecting ourselves at times, right? But knowing that, the lion doesn't have to tell people that they're powerful. People are like, whoa, it's a lion. I better watch out or that lion's gonna bite me. The lion doesn't need to be roaring at people all the time to prove that they're powerful. And if you do that, my grandmother always used to say, if you have a good argument, you really don't need to yell at people because your argument speaks for you. And the people who are always seen yelling and making kind of a spectacle of themselves, you watch out for them because they probably don't believe in what they're saying. I'm not talking about speaking loudly. I'm talking about just yelling at people and just giving into your basest, whatever the basest thing is that you want to do. This is Sun Little with Cross My Heart.
Tom and Bobby, they going, they don't live very long, but I'm still knocking and clawing, wishing gon' give me love. Or nothing. Get on, bang the guns, bang these drums. It hard. You gone, left us with none but crumb. Out in the field, we're the same. Out here, my dear, nothing changed. My heart. For love, for money, for what? Trying to sell out to the sex and candy. So yeah, man, I'm gonna give me some more from it hard. You run until your heart feels love. Oh, come. I'm on. You're gone. Left us to stop over. But out in the field, we're the same. Radio, flash steel, get locked in a cage. Early we break, feel my rage. Nothing changed. Hey. Oh, I want no more pain. Baby cries my heart.
Are you happy? Yes, I seriously asked you that. Are you happy? Did someone tell you you're not allowed to be happy? Think about it for a while. Why would you receive the message that you couldn't be happy? This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Hide it under a bushel? No, I'm gonna let it shine. I grew to understand the significance of this song as I got older. The news, the drudgery that is the 24-hour news cycle, what does it do to you at a point, at a soul level, especially with the world now? It steals your joy, especially if you were never represented in the world to begin with. And that could be the very reason that you're not happy. So why would you watch the news over and over again to tell you the same thing? What do you think about that? Wouldn't it be plausible to create our own world based on what we want, instead of complaining about the world that we don't? A world with the things that make us happy and bring us peace and healing and joy. All of the things I've spoken about in this episode have to do with building self-confidence. I think at the core of this problem is, do you believe that you're allowed to be happy? Do you regulate your ego? Not destroy it, that's not what I said. Do you regulate it and have a concern for others? Then why can't you have some happiness for yourself? What are you waiting for?
I would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.